at my side with my best friend since 2 or 3 years old, Tejo Meyer. And we had read about New Vrindaban in the Mother Earth magazine. We were living in the woods outside of New Paltz, New York, in a dome. And it was a community prior to the winter. When the winter came, everyone left, and we kind of stayed behind with a couple other couples. But we got here, and I just turned 18. Tejo's a couple years older than me, and he was sure that this was his place, that he was going to stay here. And I was like, okay, you know, I really wanted to find something else. Wasn't quite sure if this was it. But when I got here, the frozen mud was thawing, and it was rolling down the hill in Vrindaban, and Kirtan and Nanda came up and greeted us, and his heart was so open. I just knew that he was someone different than anyone else out there that I had met. I had already been chanting, reading the Bhagavad Gita, and going down to Henry Street, and so I was familiar. And that was the beginning, just meeting him, and then him getting us in prasadam, and then he shipped us off to Vrindaban, up to the Brahmachari farm. And I think one of the things that we always talk about, we laugh about, is being a Brahmachari and coming down. We worked in the garden, and that's what they did in the beginning. Anyone in the early 74, 75, you would funnel through the garden and then up into the palace crew. You know, that was it. It was really, by that time, before that, it was the plowboys and the cowboys. And then the garden came really a place to start putting bodies, because we were doing a large garden. But the biggest, I think, the thing that... Mahashakti, what can I say? It's who Krishna wants me to be.
New York City.
The thing that we remember the most back in those days is the trip. After working in the garden all day or at the palace all day, and then having to come back down to you'll be in Bahula and come back down, then make the trip up to Vrindaban at night. And if it was during the winter, you couldn't see anything. And there was, you know, not everyone made it up that road at night in the wintertime. You would hear people falling off the side of the road and down into the ravine. You'd be so tired, you'd be chanting and you'd be half sleeping, walking, and the next thing you know, you're rolling down the hill. And it was just, that's the way it was. You know, no one thought about it, and you come up, you cut up, and you got bruises all over you. I mean, one time, I really skinned myself, like I was missing all kinds of skin. I was cut myself pretty bad, and then someone up in, they said, oh, when you get down to Vrindaban tomorrow, take some cow dung and put it on that cut, because it'll purify it. I got the worst case of staph that I ever had. I thought they were gonna have to amputate my leg or something like that. It was amazing. But that was, you know, you didn't know anybody. It was fun, you know, all the pain and suffering, and all the austerity, you know. I didn't think this was so austere because we were living in the woods, and at night, if it was a night, you know, when I was living in the woods, if it was a nice night, we take our sleeping bags and sleep on the snow and just watch the stars at night. So it was coming up here. But another funny thing was, and I heard a lot of people about the frozen dhotis and saris hanging outside. When we came in, we didn't, the brahmacharis didn't get, only the older brahmachari devotees had cotton dhotis. We had these rayon things that they would roll off this big roll. And if you got too close to the fire or to the pot stove, you shriveled up and it like wrapped around you. You know, and you didn't think anything of it, and you had to wear that same one because that was the only, they wouldn't give you another dose. You know, that was it. You had one pair, and the Brahmin underwear, forget about that. Oh my God. But you didn't know any better. That was the beauty of it. And the sense of community, you know. It was a wonderful sense of community. I had lost, you know, my parents early, and as I was down here, my younger brother, it was in the middle of July of '75, my younger brother died at 15. And you know, this was my family down here, and I remember getting that phone up in Vrindaban in K-Swami's apartment, and they handed it to me, and you know, that was the first call I got in my family in years, you know, and it was like, they said, you know, my younger brother died, and you know, what do you want to do with the body? I said, burn it. What else are you going to do with it? You know, I just didn't even think about it, you know. I didn't want to go through the mess of funerals and everything like that, what I did with my parents and all that. But it was, it took time for that to sink in. I remember Kaladri and the other devotees inside K-Swami's cabin just looking at me, and it didn't hit me. It took me months for that to sink in. And then I realized, you know, more and more who my real family was. And, you know, and I left, you know, in 76, early 76, and I tried to go back out into the world, and, you know, I had dropped out of high school and, you know, built a dome in the woods, so I had no skills at all. And I went out there, tried to live, and I found I couldn't live out there. And then when I came back here, I felt I was like out of place here. But I've always felt a connection, and I kept coming back, you know. And of course, Tejo stayed here, and then he came out, and we started the Sunday feast down in Brooklyn and Queens and stuff like that. But it was there was always a tie here, and there always will be. You know, once a Brijabasi, always a Brijabasi, and you can't leave it. It's that spirit. That spirit is here, and you know, no matter how far I run away or try to go somewhere, you know, it's always right there. Here it is, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Actually, I think that's a really good note to end on, because we have 1 minute left. It's that Brijabasi spirit, that camaraderie that you can hear in everybody speaking. Mother Garindra, you know, Mananath, all the devotees before. It's just, we just came and that's just how it was, and you didn't even question it, and it was just that Brijabasi spirit. I wanted to add one thing, just because Jai Chaitanya didn't mention his father's name was Bhagavanananda, who did all the sculpting. So if anybody wants to know.